ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the establisher of universal religion. Let us pray to the Divine Spirit to lead us from unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. I am speaking on today the topic 6 steps towards absolute bliss. Of course, this topic is meant for those who are advanced in their life, those who are pursuing the pursuit of knowledge. Well, it is very necessary to know the principles and values which we should cherish in our life. Vedanta shows us the way towards unadulterated, everlasting bliss. But we have to follow all the steps thoroughly. It is very important to follow the footsteps given in order to reach the goal. First of all, we should know what is Vedanta. We are all familiar with this term. Again and again, this term is used very frequently nowadays. It is a knowledge of our real self. The knowledge of our real self. We know our self consisting of the physical body. We know also our inner self consisting of our mind and intellect. One is outer self, the other one is inner self. But we do not know our real self. Our real self is supreme. We are that supreme being. It is to realize that real self we have come in this human life. We know it not. Vedanta gives us the knowledge of our real self. With that knowledge, we attain absolute bliss, absolute bliss. So, from this point of view, how it is very important to have Vedantic approach to our life. Now I shall deal with the subject step by step. There is a famous Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka. Last time also I spoke on the same Upanishad with the topic discovering freedom. Today's topic also is taken mainly from that Upanishad. One fine morning, Yajnavalkya Maharshi called his wife and announced that he would like to terminate his life as a householder, and he would enter into next order, which is called Vanaprastha. That is, after performing duties in life, an intense urge comes within to probe into the real self, which is the source of peace and joy. The soul becomes satisfied to a certain extent after enjoying through the life. Now it wants to probe thoroughly, to go inward and realize, have that direct experience of the real self. So he called his wife, well, we have so many properties here, possessions, etc. Before I take to that secluded life, I would like to divide all these possessions so that you might live happily thereafter in peace without any problem whatsoever. Because he felt it was an obligation to provide something for the family if he goes away to the secluded place for practicing intense spiritual sadhana. At this moment, his wife Maitreyi, a very shrewd, intelligent, pure-hearted, noble, all wonderful, noble virtues were well established in her. She wanted to know from her learned husband, Yajnavalkya, the great sage, whether wealth, such as property, etc., of this world would confer immortality, the state of absolute bliss, on its possessor. People work very hard to possess properties, to buy new estates, go on multiplying their possessions, thinking that they would get into a state of happiness, unmixed with sorrow, misery, and so on. The state of absolute bliss on its possessor, is it possible? Maitreyi is asking us that question to her husband. Straight came the answer. The Maharshi said, there was no hope of immortality through wealth, through such means. Maitreyi was very sensitive and she was very intelligent too. Her buddhi was very sharpened one. So she immediately said to him, in that case, why should she bother about this property? Why should she bother about this possession which she was thinking to give it to her? He would rather have a little of his knowledge to attain everlasting peace and bliss. He would prefer that, not this possession which may give temporary comfort and a sort of happiness, what we may call a shadow happiness, not the real one. The real one is permanent. The temporary one comes and goes. It causes more misery than happiness itself. So the Maharshi, when he heard this from his beloved wife, he was greatly pleased. And he found out here was a qualified student who was ready to receive this knowledge of the Spirit, which he calls it as Akshara Vidya. Because our children, we have attended the children camp, they are all sitting here. I don't know how far they would be able to understand these things. Actually, this talk is meant for the adults. Anyway, there is nothing wrong in hearing good, noble, spiritual, elevating ideas. Now, Yajnavalkya Maharshi began to impart Akshara Vidya, the knowledge of the imperishable. That only could cut at the root of bondage, nothing else. Nothing else. If you want to get rid of bondage, if you want to enjoy the supreme bliss of freedom, you must learn the knowledge of the imperishable. Only that knowledge, which is strictly one without a second, what we call in Sanskrit Advaita, can effectively dispel the notion of diversity. Diversity is the cause of bondage. As long as we are fascinated by the diversity, we are tightly in bondage. Now this imperishable Brahman is same as the Atman, which we use it many times in our scriptures, which is pure sentience. How the world of sound and color, as well as the finite selves, are in their ultimate essence nothing but pure intelligence, has also necessarily to be set forth. So, in order to enjoy the benefit of this Akshara Vidya, a life of renunciation, non-attachment to our possessions and other things in this world, have also to be enjoined. So jnana, the wisdom, the knowledge, that is a direct road to achieve bliss. There are 6 steps that will transform the knowledge into immediate experience. The immediate experience is what we call in Sanskrit Sakshatkar. The one is, first I will tell you what are the 6 steps, then I begin to take one by one. The first step is the need for renunciation. The second, the knowledge, jnana, what we call, is a direct road to liberation and not karma, the activities. The third, the nature of the highest reality. The fourth step, how the world of diversity is reducible to Brahman, the supreme Brahman, one without a second, one appearing as many. There is continuous connection between the one and the many. Many cannot exist without the one. That is to be established. The fifth one, how the finite selves, what we call so many individual beings, merge into the Atman, the one without second. The sixth is the final discipline that will transform the knowledge into immediate experience, Sakshatkar. Now these are the 6 steps towards the absolute bliss. Now need for renunciation. People rather feel difficult to hear this word renunciation. They think they may have to run away from their home, they have to run away from their properties. They think like that. So many of them think spirituality is not for them. But it is not so. Spirituality is certainly for those who are well rooted in the world, because they know the temporary effect of what they are having with them. Yajnavalkya's decision to renounce his wealth and his wife Maitreyi's rejection of the same, though it is offered to her, are of the highest significance. What courage she must have to reject whatever the things offered by her husband, that too for her own maintenance. They strike the keynote of the instruction that is going to follow and prepare the ground for it. One cannot worship both God and Mammon at the same time. If one clings to his earthly possessions, then he must not be surprised if the gates of heaven are closed against him. As long as he is enjoying this world and all its objects, well, so long he has to be in that condition. The question of freedom doesn't arise to such a person. It is said in the Bible that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a greedy, wealthy one to enter the kingdom of heaven. What a significant statement. The gem of spirituality is there in every religion. We should have eyes to see. So the attachment to our possessions is quite incompatible with the aspiration for the life divine. So, complete detachment without any mental reservation whatever is most important preliminary condition that must be followed before one could study Vedanta effectively. Such renunciation and detachment are enjoined in almost every Upanishad. In Ishavasya Upanishad, there is a famous statement, Tena tyaktena bunjitha. You shall enjoy by renunciation. And you are the true enjoyer. In Taittiriya Upanishad also it is stated that the scholar who is not the slave of desires enjoys the greatest happiness. Again, in another Upanishad, Mahanarayana, it is stated that na karmana na prajaya dhane na tyage naike amritatvama. There the Maharshi says very clearly, not by engaging oneself in activities without fixing yourself in a particular goal, not by simply procreating children, not by acquisition of wealth, does a man attain immortality, but only by renunciation. Tyage naike amritattva manushuhu. So it only shows how it is important to practice this renunciation. The more we practice renunciation, the more we become peaceful. Practice of renunciation means lessening our desires, which has occupied whole of our mind. There is no place in the mind at all for anything to think about. It is so much overcrowded by desires. Desires and desires and desires and desires. Up to the infinity. So as long as so many desires are there in the mind, it only shows that we will have to take so many births to satisfy all those desires in our mind. Nobody knows the end of those desires. Shankaracharya, the great person who gave the commentary on Vedanta, he also said, Iha mutra phala bhoga viragaha. Renunciation of all desires for just enjoyment of the senses in this or in the other worlds. Then Maharshi tells Maitreyi in the course of his dialogue, in the course of imparting knowledge to her, who is well receiving it with full attention. He said, husband, wife, children, wealth, property, all these things are dear, not for their own sake, but for the sake of the Atman, which is our real self. It is not for the sake of the husband that he is loved, but for one's own sake that he is loved. The Atman here refers to the highest, which is no other than Brahman and not the finite self. The statement that everything is dear only in relation to the Atman means that the Atman is the only supreme value and that we must cultivate a distaste for all other things. All other things are secondary. Atman is the primary. We should have this firm conviction, have clear conviction, then only we can proceed with practice. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also it is said, Tadetat preyah putrat, preyo vittat, preyo nyasmat, sarvasmat, antarataram yadayamatma. All these are very famous passages. That Atman is dearer than a son, he is dearer than wealth, he is dearer than everything else. Where is it? It is innermost. Innermost of our heart is the seat of Atman. Atmanameva priyamupasita taya atmanameva priyamupaste nahasya priyam pramayukam bhavati. The same Upanishad says one should meditate, one should deeply think over that Atman alone as the most dear one. He who meditates on the Atman alone as dear, what he holds dear, such a person will never perish. He attains liberation, he enjoys bliss even while living in this mortal frame. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha yasmin sthito na dukkena gurunapi vichalyate. The Atman is the highest value. Gaining it, one finds there is no greater gain. When one is established in Atman, he is not moved even by the heaviest of sorrows. Atmarthe prithavin tyajet. For the sake of that Atman, it is desirable to renounce everything in this world. Nothing is precious, valuable compared to the Atman, the divine spirit, the supreme consciousness which is in our heart. Once a king came to a holy man and he requested him to release him from worldly bondage. He said, I have done enough of work. I have looked after the kingdom for so many years and I have attended to all the needs of the people now and then. Now I feel intensely I must be freed. I feel I am bound by all these entanglements, all these involvements. I feel a stage has come. Enough of all these things. Enough. Nothing more. I have reached that state. Will you please kindly release me from the bondage? Will you please free me from all this network of so many things around me? Will you please show me the way to have that peace and bliss? He is asking the Mahatma who is well established in spiritual life. So the king is asking him, and the holy man of course gave him many instructions, but yet the king was persistent in his request. Again and again he would ask, in spite of receiving the instructions from the holy man. Then the holy man kept quiet for some time. One day the king has come to him as usual to see him. The holy man was firmly clasping a pillar. He was holding tight. When the king approached him, the holy man said to him, "Oh my dear friend, just disentangle me. Please disentangle me." He's shouting and crying repeatedly. The king saw the situation and he was surprised to a little extent, and he said, "Why don't you let go the hold? You are holding it tightly." Then the holy man replied, No. You must disentangle me." Then the king replied, A great fun indeed. You yourself have clasped the pillar tightly, and at will you can leave it off, but no, you will request me to come to your rescue. Why don't you yourself give it up? King is telling the holy man. Then the holy man left the pillar and said to the king, now it is the same case with you. You yourself are clasping the world, involving yourself in so many things, and yet you constantly request me to release you from it. Why don't you yourself give it up? Then the king understood the significance and the need for renunciation. That's it. The importance of renunciation. As long as you are not prepared for that, forget about freedom. Enjoy yourself nicely. Many more millions of births. Even though it is a difficult experience for you have to pass through so many pain. Well, you wanted it, have it. If you don't want, give it up. It is in your own hands. That's the Mahatma's telling. How true it is. We are hugging the thing and we want somebody to come and release us. That's the great fun. So much about renunciation. See, in this short span of 1 hour or so, we can't give all details about so many aspects. I can only hint certain things. It is for you to elaborate. We have got a wonderful library here. You can refer to many textbooks which are very interesting. You will be able to understand many things more clearly. Now that's about the first step. Now I am going to the second step, that is jnana, the knowledge. That is the direct road to the abode of bliss, not activities. People normally they are deceived, I should say. They are deceived by telling, oh, he is a karma yogi. Why? Because he is working from morning 6 o'clock up to night 11 o'clock. Non-stop he is working. So he is a karma yogi. Simply working is a karma yogi. Machines also do lot of work. Why don't you call them karma yogis? Lot of difference. Unless your goal is fixed, you can't be called as a yogi. Well, when Yajnavalkya Maharshi offered wealth to his wife, Maitreyi, she asked him directly whether that would make her immortal. Give me direct answer. Don't give any indirect answer. Give me direct answer to my direct question. And she was very dear to Maharshi, and Maharshi was very dear to her. So he replied, well, no, it won't give you immortality. There is no hope of winning perpetual happiness through wealth. Maitreyi then rejected all the wealth of the world and wanted to be instructed in that knowledge which will make for life divine. So it is evident from this initial discussion that jnana is a direct means to salvation and not karma. Wealth here is treated as having an instrumental value. It provides the means for the performance of activities. The more one engages in the activities, the more one becomes entangled in them. Hence, karma will entail transmigration as its necessary consequence. Ignorance is the real cause of our bondage, and it can be removed only by knowledge, which is its opposite. Darkness can be dispelled only by light. Karma will rather feed ignorance than uproot it, because there is no direct antithesis between them. Instead, there is an inner affinity between them. Owing to ignorance, we separate ourselves from the rest of the world, and naturally there arises a desire to come by the things that we feel are not ours. To fulfill the desires, we engage in action. They are interconnected. There is no activity without desire. There is no desire without entering into action. If we get the things, we are not satisfied with them. On the other hand, we want more. So that means desires are endless. If we do not get what we desire, we become disappointed, we become unhappy, which in turn leads to other undesirable qualities like anger, jealousy, hatred. I have a big list. In any case, our ignorance becomes deeper and deeper. Avidya, kama, karma. These three constitute a vicious circle. And once a man gets involved in it, he will have to do many rounds in it before he can get out of it. So, people are bound by activities and freed by knowledge. Knowledge of Brahman leads to the highest goal of attaining absolute bliss. Knowledge is supreme, as Bhagavad Gita says, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitramah vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddhaha kalenatmani vindati. Verily there exists nothing in this world as pure as knowledge. One attains a stage of purity through performing selfless activity, what we call in Sanskrit nishkama karma. At the correct time, he realizes that knowledge is one's own purified heart, and he will be in absolute bliss. People who want to satisfy their senses keep on working, involving themselves more and more in them. Karma will not uproot the ignorance, the root cause of all difficulties. They may have some temporary relief through the performance of some activities. Temporary results do not give real satisfaction. As long as ajnana is there is every possibility that people may be landed again in some form or other of the trouble. But through Atma Jnana, through the realization of the Supreme Divine, ajnana, ignorance, is rooted out completely. All the sins are fully destroyed. Jnana is to be realized in one's own heart. There is a significant verse in Prabodha Sudhakar, a Sanskrit composition by Acharya Shankar. He says there, Gadadvanta grahantataha kshititale deepam nidhayojjvalam pancha chidra madomukham hi kalasham tasyo paristapayet tadbahye paritonurandra amalam trinancha kasturikam sadratnam vyajanam nyasech kalashachidra dhvanirgachatam tejomshena pratak padartha nimajnanam hi yajjayate tadandraihi kalashena va kim mrudo bandena tailena va kim sutrena na chaitadasti ruchiram Pratyaksha badadato deepajyotirihaikameva sharanam dehe tathatma sthitah. Now the meaning of this wonderful composition is this. Place a bright light oil lamp on the floor in a room which is completely dark. Cover it with a mud pot with 5 holes, its mouth downwards. Outside it, place against each hole a gooseberry, a veena, musk, a precious gem, and a fan. These 5 articles are kept in front of the holes, 5 holes outside the mud pot. One is able to experience each of the objects through the ray of light emanating from the corresponding hole. Now, does the knowledge or experience arise from the holes, the mud pot, the oil, or the wick of the lamp? Reason tells us that the light of the lamp alone causes it, and Atman in the body is its exact counterpart. So, it is made very clear, jnana is supreme. Nahi jnanena sadrisham. It is unparalleled. Through jnana we have to achieve the supreme bliss. The third step is nature of the highest reality. What is that? The highest reality is termed, what I said before, commencing the topic, Atman and Brahman are one and the same. Idam sarvam yadayam atma. It is said to be the only reality. By knowing the Atman, one can claim to know everything else. Acharya Shankara says again, since the Atman is the only reality, there is nothing else to know. The sole reality is described as sentience, all compact. In Sanskrit there is a term called Vijnana Ghana. It is one solid mass of intelligence in which there is no foreign element at all. It is therefore pure, homogeneous, infinite, boundless, without a break and devoid of differences of any kind. It is said that on attaining this infinite particular knowledge completely ceases. One no longer feels that he is a separate individual, that he is the son of so and so, that he belongs to one community or the other, that he has possessions and so forth. All these credentials are no more required. But consciousness never fails through these particular states, though these particular states may disappear. This is what Yajnavalkya Maharshi means when he tells Maitreyi, this is quite sufficient knowledge. It is clearly stated in the Upanishad, the knower's function of knowing can never be lost because it is immortal. Lastly, it is added that the Atman cannot be known in the way in which we know other things, for it is never an object in relation to any subject. It is the substrate on which the states of the mind appear and disappear, like bubbles on the surface of the ocean. It is a foundational consciousness involved in every judgment that we make. As Kenopanishad says, it is pratibodha viditam. There is no need to prove it because it stands self-revealed. Shankaracharya again, in his commentary on Gita, says, the Atman indeed is unknown to nobody, for it is always self-evident. It is to be experienced in deep communion and not in the ordinary way. Now the fourth step is how the world of diversity is reduced to the Atma. I told you earlier that diversity causes bondage. Diversity causes bondage. We perceive the world of diversity. It is perceptual testimony. Atman is the only reality. It is the testimony of the Upanishad. There appears to be a contradiction between the two. The contradiction, however, is more apparent than real. Close reflection will show that the diversity can be reduced by stages to the unity of the Atman. The process of analysis will help us in this regard. It proceeds by eliminating everything that is purely particular. Ultimately, when everything that is adventitious is eliminated, what remains is the element of consciousness, for without it, no reality, either in the waking or dream state, can be. The Upanishad says, because of the inherence of pure sentience in everything that we know, we conclude that the world of diversity has no existence apart from the Atman. Examples are given to illustrate that the world does not exist independently of the Atman, either at the time of its origin or during the period of its continuance, or finally at the time of its dissolution. Just as they give an example of fire. Before the appearance of the sparks, smoke, embers and flames, just as before the appearance of these, we have only fire. Even so, at the time of its origin and prior to it, the universe is nothing but Brahman or Atman. The mention of the Vedas, Itihasas, Puranas, Sutras and so forth, emanating effortlessly from Brahman, is symbolic of the differentiation of the infinite into names and forms. The example of the musical instruments, the drum, the conch and the veena, is given to show that the world cannot be separated from Brahman, which is all pervasive. When a musical instrument is sounded, it produces two kinds of sounds, general and special. The former is the peculiar timbre quality of the instrument, and the latter the particular tune that is sought to be produced. These two are blended when we play a musical instrument. It is impossible to separate the latter from the former. General and particular, they mixed together. In the same manner, the world which is revealed and the pervasive intelligence which reveals it are both inextricably mixed up. That at the time of dissolution the world merges in Brahman is brought out by what is known as another Shruti. It is said, just as the ocean is a place where all waters finally merge and unify, just as the skin is an organ in which all kinds of touch, hard and soft, rough and smooth, are merged, even so it is in Brahman that the universe rests in the state of dissolution. Touch is the symbolic of all other perceptions, and skin stands for all the other sense organs. The perceptions, the objects perceived, and the organs whereby they are perceived, all these merge in Brahman. Perceptions come under thought, which is the function of the mind. This in its turn comes under the more general function of the intellect. This general function of the intellect is subsumed under consciousness, where it is stripped of all that is in the nature of a mere adjunct or upadhi. Then we are left with Brahman, which is pure intelligence. The fifth step, the finite selves merge in Brahman. We are cut off from the Supreme Atman by ignorance, and so we regard ourselves as independent, separate entities. I am so and so individual. I am afraid to lose my individuality. It is terrible for people to think that we lose our individuality. The sense of separation arises from the association with the limiting adjuncts like the body, the sense organs, the mind, the intellect, and so forth. Who is this individual being? Because I am identifying myself with this body-mind complex, I am just attached to it and I can't get out of it, and I am afraid of it, to think of getting out of it. It is like water changing into salt crystals by the addition of particles of earth and heat. If the salt crystals are thrown into water, what happens? The extraneous elements disappear and the crystals are no longer perceived. They merge in their source, water. Similarly, if by undergoing the prescribed discipline we can manage to disengage the finite self from all its adjuncts, it will disappear as such, but will survive as the Atman. This realization that the finite self is non-different from the Atman or Brahman is a high watermark of spiritual life. It is the culmination of all our moral and intellectual endeavors. It is the final purushartha, the goal, the crown and consummation of existence. The initial statement, this Atman is everything, acquires its full significance only with this realization. Coming to the last discipline, last step towards absolute bliss, Yajnavalkya Maharshi said to Maitreyi, the Atman, my dear, should be realized, should be heard of, reflected on and meditated upon. In this statement, he is referring to the Vedantic discipline of Shravan, Manan and Nididhyasana. These three are very important disciplines to practice Vedanta, to realize our true nature, to enjoy peace and absolute bliss. One is Shravan, a discipline which means hearing Vedantic texts such as Upanishads and reading good books on Vedanta which deal with the subject. This is the first discipline. The second step is then Manan, where we should cogitate, think over and analyze the things we have heard and convince ourselves that Vedanta will lead us to jnana, knowledge. In this stage, we intellectually grasp the truth, but this alone will not lead us to the realization of the Atman. We will have to subjectively realize our oneness with all pervading, unchanging reality, that is Brahman. For this, we will have to ascend to the third step, which is called Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, that is contemplative meditation. For actual realization, contemplative meditation without intermission is to be followed, approaching a competent guru in proper form. We should sit at his feet, listen to his instructions, bestow thought on it, and after attaining intellectual conviction, we should meditate on it deeply. Such constant and uninterrupted meditation will transform the instruction which is necessary, mediate and indirect, into an immediate and direct experience. Such first-hand communion is known as sakshatkar, or it's also called as aparokshanubhuti. Only the intimate experience of the unity of Atman will dispel the common notion of the diversity of the world based on perception. So long as the instruction remains as a mere intellectual conviction, it cannot prevail against the felt reality of the world of many names and forms. If we are to realize the truth of the Upanishadic statement, this Atman is everything, we have to go through the discipline to which Maharshi has called for our attention. The Atman can then be seen in the same way in which we see the world. In the Gita, there are several references to Jnana and Vijnana, the former meaning mere intellectual knowledge, and the latter its transformation into felt experience. Jnana Vijnana Druptatma Kutastho Vijitendriyaha Yukta Ityuchate Yogi Samaloshtasmakanchanaha, whose heart is filled with satisfaction by wisdom and realization, and is changeless, whose senses are conquered, and to whom a lump of earth, stone, and gold are the same. The yogi is called steadfast. So these are the 6 steps towards absolute bliss. And if we carefully practice all these disciplines in our life, we are sure to reach our goal. With these words, I conclude my talk. Thank you all. Coming Sunday, August 28, we have got Shri Krishna Jayanti Puja. Morning at 11:30 a.m. the special puja will be here. All of you are cordially invited to attend that program. You know, we had children camp since last Sunday. Today is valedictory function. Immediately after this program, you are all requested to go to the auditorium in the basement where we have the program, and there will be children's play on Swami Vivekanand, and there will be valedictory address, and all programs are held there. All of you, please, after this program is concluded, please go to the auditorium to attend this children's camp's valedictory program. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunakto Sahaviryam Karavavaghai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. May the Divine Supreme Being protect both of us, the preceptor and the student. May He nourish us both. May we work in harmony with great vigor. May our study be illuminating and fruitful. May we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.